Good afternoon, everybody. Well, I spent today receiving briefings from emergency services personnel as well as the Bureau of Meteorology, and in a moment Deputy Commissioner as well as Matt from the Bureau will speak to you about the impending weather event. I've also spoken at length to the mayors of Hinchinbrook and Cassowary Shire, and I can inform that both of those local governments have now stood up, and they are bracing for the potential for a lot of rain in the days ahead. And I make the observation, this is an event that we are focusing on the potential for flooding on the back of heavy rainfall. And just because there isn't the prospect of big winds with a cyclone doesn't mean that there's not a risk for heavy rainfall and the potential that causes for flooding. We are prepared, well and truly, and I can advise Queenslanders that we've spent a lot of time ahead of the disaster season focusing on preparation, and the pre-deployment that has occurred in the past day has given me confidence about how well prepared we are. And both of the mayors reflected that to me in their conversations. We've got emergency services personnel on the ground, including Swiftwater Rescue. We've got the SES, the Reconstruction Authority, for post any recovery needed, indeed many state agencies. So my message to Queenslanders is we are well and truly prepared, and we're asking you to do the same. Take every opportunity you can around your home and your business to make sure that you are prepared in the event of that rainfall coming. In terms of the area in North and Far North Queensland here, particularly I reflect on Ingham, which is where I grew up. I know this area really well, and it can handle a lot of rain, and the people there are really resilient. I'm just asking them not to be complacent. There is the prospect of a lot of rain. They can handle it. We just want them to stay connected and listen to the warnings. And if they do that, I have every confidence that the preparations, both at a government level but also at an individual level, will ensure the event can be managed. Where to from here? Next steps. So earlier today I got senior ministers as well as directors general to receive a briefing from both the Bureau as well as Shane, and my intention is we will reflect on what rainfall occurs overnight, and we'll make a decision tomorrow about the next step for the Queensland Disaster Management Committee, and I'll brief all of you following the event overnight to see what happens. But just in conclusion, there is the prospect of a lot of rain in the next few days, and I want Queenslanders to know we're well prepared for that, and I'm asking individuals to do the same. I'll hand over to you now, Sean.
Thank you, Premier. Deputy Commissioner Shane Shalepi, the State Disaster Coordinator. Can I say this is shaping up to be a significant rain and flooding event, and that's what we're planning for. The catchments in far north and northern Queensland are extremely wet. We've had a lot of rain over the last week and in the lead up to and during this season, and even small amounts of rain, these catchments will respond quickly and create flash flooding. But the risk here sits past flash flooding. It also considers significant riverine flooding. You will hear from the Bureau shortly of the totals of rainfall that we're expecting over the next 3 to 6 days, but in particular the next 3, and it is significant. Just because the risk of a cyclone in this area has decreased, it doesn't mean that we will not have a significant flooding or rain event in the area. Please don't stay complacent. We urge, or I urge, the community to stay in contact with our emergency warnings, our alerts, and understand your risk. Understand the flooding risk in your area of far north Queensland, in particular during the watch area, which is south of Cairns right through to Mackay. And if you are seeing that you need to leave your premises due to flooding, I ask you to know when to go. So I ask you to leave early so that you don't put yourself or your family at risk. Make the arrangements now and understand that if that occurs, where are you going to go? Are you going to stay with family and friends? How are you going to get there, and what roads are you going to travel on? And I ask the community to stay aware of those circumstances and know when to go. If you do need to evacuate, local disaster management dashboards will have, when the time is right, the details of evacuation centres. I'm very confident, as the State Disaster Coordinator, that the system is prepared. We have been briefing our district and our local disaster coordination groups. As the Premier said, we have pre-deployed all of our resources into the area and are ready to support the communities. I just ask the communities again to understand your risk, understand what this amount of rain will mean to you, keep an eye on our messaging and alerts, and if you need to leave your premises, please leave early. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Matt Colby from the Bureau of Meteorology. I'll give a quick weather briefing. So, areas of North Queensland, particularly between Cairns and Townsville, have recorded very heavy rainfall over the past week, with falls of 400 to 700 millimetres about the Cassowary coast and some isolated falls above 800 millimetres. This has resulted in extremely wet catchments and full water storages. We're expecting renewed heavy to intense rainfall over the coming days, through today and at least until Monday, with daily totals of 200 to 300 millimetres and isolated falls up to 500 millimetres likely. Similar daily totals are expected over at least those 3 days through Saturday, Sunday and into Monday. A severe weather warning is already current for heavy rainfall. This rainfall is likely to cause dangerous and life-threatening flash and riverine flooding in catchments from Cairns to Mackay. A flood watch is current across those areas and for the adjacent inland catchments also. Flood warnings have already been issued for a number of catchments, and we expect more flood warnings to be issued through today, and then really importantly updated as we move through this event on Saturday, Sunday and into Monday. And we are expecting major flooding. The rainfall that we're seeing over North Queensland has been driven by a really active monsoon trough. There are actually 3 lows of interest embedded in this monsoon trough. The first low is sitting just off the coast of Cairns, and it is what is driving the rainfall we're seeing between Cairns and Townsville. The second is in the Gulf of Carpentaria. Now, both of these lows are quite close to land, and there's only a very low chance in that 10 to 15% of them forming into tropical cyclones. The third low is further out in the Coral Sea, a long way off the coast, about 1,500 k's in fact off the coast. This system has a high chance of forming into a tropical cyclone, but is not at this stage expected to affect the Queensland coast. So to sum up, this is a significant weather event, and regardless of whether we see tropical cyclone formation, the intense rainfall and flooding are the major concern. And it is possible that over the 3 to 4 days that we're looking at the moment, we'll see rainfall totals in excess of 1,000 millimetres. The situation will be rapidly evolving, and it's really important that the community stay up to date over these coming days with the latest warnings as they're updated across various platforms, including the Bureau's app and the Bureau's webpage. Thanks.
We're seeing some pretty pictures this past half an hour or so. What would it take for that region to sort of hit those 2019 flood levels?
2019 saw nearly 10 to 12 days worth of intense rainfall, and I think the totals were up towards 2,000 millimetres over that period. So we are going to monitor this really closely. There will be warnings, likely warnings for the Ross River in the Townsville area, but they will have to be closely monitored exactly how much rainfall falls in that catchment over the coming days.
Should we see cyclones form, despite it being a low chance, what kind of conditions could that bring?
The rainfall conditions will probably look very similar, and that is our major concern. If a cyclone does develop, there's obviously the wind threat that comes with that, and with the sort of showers and thunderstorms that will be embedded in the monsoon trough, there's always the threat of some damaging winds, but the formation of a cyclone will concentrate those winds and increase the potential for damaging winds or destructive winds, and there's also the potential for abnormally high tides. And in fact, there's already the potential for some tide levels above the normal high tides, and that will impact coastal communities over the weekend as well, particularly where rainfall and river catchments are trying to empty out, but the tide levels are quite high, pushing that water back.
Question for Shane. Sorry.
Oh.
Just looking ahead over after the 3 to 4 days, where do you see that low tracking? Do you think it'll come down the coast to the southeast?
No, it looks like it tracks inland. In fact, the Gulf flow and the Cairns flow almost merge and then drift inland, which drags that rainfall down over the central and northern parts to the south of the Gulf there. But that's in the tropics, a long way out at day sort of 5, 6, 7. So we'll have to monitor exactly how that pans out really carefully.
Question for Shane. You able to walk us through the numbers of pre-deployed assets to Townsville and Cairns?
Look, I probably don't have the exact numbers, but can I say we've already pre-deployed additional police up there. 35 left this morning, more were leaving during the day to head up. I've spoken to the Chief Officer of the SES. They've pre-positioned their flood boats right through not only Townsville but right up through Ingham, Cardwell, right through to Cairns, and they've pre-positioned additional SES staff and have additional SES staff on standby. The Queensland Fire Department advised me that they've pre-positioned swiftwater rescue crews already in those areas. I've been advised from our power companies that they have approximately 300 staff already in those areas that are able to be deployed. The Queensland Reconstruction Authority are pre-deploying their regional liaison officers into those areas. I have been in contact with all of our agencies, our health agencies, who are already looking at our vulnerable people, our dialysis patients, our maternity patients, and already putting plans in place to manage staff in those communities. So you can see, and there's plenty more, so you can see that what we have already pre-positioned into those regions to support our local disaster management groups in managing the response is quite significant. I can say that most of those areas have also stood up their coordination hubs or centres and have additional more staff to go in. We just need to be careful that we don't push all our staff into a particular area. We were advised by the Bureau that the system still has the ability to move a little bit north or south. That's why that warning area is so wide, and we don't want to put our staff in the wrong spot.
How many calls for assistance have been received, and what are they related to?
So overnight we had 36 calls for assistance from the SES, and during today we've had another 26 in around the Townsville area. Most of it has been in relation to sandbags, tarping of roofs, leaky roofs. We haven't seen any of the destruction, winds or trees down at this point in time. And it's a good point to remember that our local councils will make sandbagging facilities open and available. They'll be on their on the local council website, their disaster website, and probably today is the time to start thinking about, if you need to sandbag, to do that today rather than trying to sandbag when we're already in flooding events. So the SES are there and ready to respond. The Chief Officer advises me that they have plenty of capacity in the state. I've also briefed the ADF this morning, and I've also briefed our National Emergency Management Agency on any support that may be required.
So you could have the ADF move in if you need to?
That's always available. I can say I'm very comfortable with the resourcing I have on the ground for this event, but as a state disaster coordinator, it is my job to plan for worst case scenarios and make sure that I have all resources available to me to keep Queenslanders safe.
Sadly, you're often seen looting in situations like this. What message would you have?
Well, I've spoken to the Police Commissioner today, and the Police Commissioner has deployed additional resourcing up north already to ensure that if people need to leave their homes, the police are able to keep them safe. Unfortunately, during events we do see looting. What I can say is if you want to go out and loot when our community are vulnerable in Queensland, the police will have no sympathy for you.
I think the Bruce Highway's cut it bowl and it below it, obviously more potential closures to come. What sort of challenges does that pose in terms of getting resources in and out of this region?
That's why we really focus just on starting to pre-deploy. It's always going to present a challenge. We have taken measures today to make sure our supply routes were open. We've resupplied all of our communities today, made sure that we've engaged with all of our major providers, IGA, Woolworths, Coles, making sure there's sufficient stocks in those communities. We will see the Bruce Highway cut at different locations during this event, and anyone who's travelling on the road really need to stay in contact with those messages, because otherwise you could end up getting trapped on the Bruce between two closure points.
What difficulty does this weather event cause for your aerial assets? I know in previous events you haven't been able to use helicopters and that, what's the situation now?
Yeah, and that will have to be continually monitored. We've made sure that we have our rescue helicopter as well as our heavy lift capability available to us. But like all events, and we saw last year in some of the significant events, if we have significant rain or wind, sometimes those assets can't fly. And that's why we have to have plans to also support, from ground. And that message to the community is so important, that if you think you need to go early, because what we don't want to be doing is having to rescue you off the roof of your house or in a flood boat at 2 o'clock in the morning, because it's a dangerous operation for our emergency services, but it's also dangerous for you if we've got to take you out of your house at that time. Thank you.
Yeah, Alex?
Premier, when can we expect to see the Inspector General Emergency Management Report into the 23-24 wet season following Cyclone Jasper?
I'll get that for you, Alex, and I have answered that before in terms of my strong desire to make sure that that's public and that critical evaluation can occur. Today my focus is on this, but I can assure you we will turn our attention to that.
Maria, where is the state government at in terms of discussions with the staff and workers speaking out today?
Nothing else disaster related at the moment?
The only question
good?
I have on that is the Bruce Highway, particularly around Hingham, was cut off remarkably quickly this time. What would you have to say to that, obviously, in terms of Bruce Highway?
Well, that it's the lifeblood of regional Queensland, and every time you have an event like this, it exposes how vulnerable people who live in North and Far North Queensland are, because they are at the mercy of one road, and one road that hasn't been upgraded enough. And events like this prove it.
So just
Yeah.
on that
Thanks.
question, where is the state government at on that?
We remain my position remains exactly the same as it was yesterday, last week and last month. It's up to the company to detail to Queenslanders, Australians, and indeed the market, their position. I'll outline ours. My concern is not for the company, it's for the workers. And my strong message to whoever will be operating the casino in whatever capacity, if there is a change at all, and I'm not suggesting that I don't know the company's financial position, that's for others to comment, but my only focus is on continuity of service. Whoever owns it, for whatever period, our sole focus is on continuity of service so that the people who are employed there can be able to go to work there tomorrow. And if that occurs, I think long-term Queenslanders will take comfort in the fact that an important part of our city's offering and an important part of our economy can remain there.
But are you confident those workers will be safe if this business goes under?
I'll call it out every minute of every day, and I'll stand beside anyone who's willing to do that with me. My message to Star, to any potential future administrator or indeed future operator, we will work with you, but there's one condition, and that condition is the workers come first, and that facility has to remain open so that they do come first. And if that's the going in position, you'll find a state government that's very sympathetic to working to future hopes and dreams of that site. But everything is about the workers, and I've said that consistently. I'm not concerned about Star, its shareholders, the long-term liquidity of that company. Wish them well. But I'm just worried about the workers, and there's a lot of them, and they need the right to be able to provide for their family. Whoever owns it, whatever logo's on there, Queenslanders don't really care about that. They just want to know that long-term that facility can be viable and that it can provide the vibrancy that a city like ours needs, and that's both the Gold Coast and Brizzy. But in the short to medium term, it's about continuity of service so those workers can stay there, and I don't think that's too much to ask.
Are you concerned, though, that if someone else doesn't come in to operate that business, then we have this huge asset there that you've got to get these workers to operate?
Yeah, I'm confident that long term a city like Brisbane and indeed the Gold Coast can sustain those kind of facilities. I really do. the complexities that have been seen on the site, and I don't think this is any secret, the complexities is because the build costs escalated, and I think you all know why that happened. We've taken some big steps to stop that happening in the future. So I've got every faith that long term the viability of the casinos on the coast and indeed in Brisbane are very, very viable. Of course they are. We're a great state. We've got the underpinnings are so strong. We've got great growth heading into 32. It's just that short-term headache because of the struggles of the company.
So tax deferrals are off the table?
Well, I've spoken about my focus. It's not about Star. It's about the workers. So
But are tax deferrals on the table or not?
well, I've been pretty clear. It's about workers. So they don't have tax deferrals. So my focus to Star or whoever might be operating that facility is we will do all we can to assist, make sure that the future of that precinct is viable. But our condition is that it has to remain open and the workers have to remain front and centre. So I'm not entertaining that, and I never have been. My focus is only on the workers, and I've said the same thing from day dot.
How do you protect the workers, especially short term, if you're not too worried about the staff?
Well, if I let me answer it without commenting on the viability of Star, right? Because you can speculate on the viability of Star. I won't, because and I made the point the other day. Your reporting's been fair on it, so I'm going to say again, I'm not commenting on the viability of Star. But whoever is operating it has to maintain a continuity of service, and that's not too much to ask. The asset is there. Whoever is operating it today, next week or next year, provided there's continuity of service, and that is completely possible, if that happens, Queenslanders will come on the journey, and I don't think that's too much to ask.
Would you consider granting another casino licence in Queensland, given there's only one at the moment?
We haven't turned our attention to that.
Has the government received any further communication from Star over the last week or so?
Yeah, and I think I said last week when I was asked the question, I've asked Ros Bates as Trade Minister and Deb Frecklington as Attorney, and indeed David Janetsky as Treasurer, to all send a message to everyone who's either in Queensland now or thinking of investing in Queensland that we want to see a viable business environment, and that includes 2 viable casino precincts. It's really important to us, and I'm sure that dialogue will continue, but my position hasn't changed, and that is I'm worried about the workers, and I do believe there's an opportunity for that to continue.
When are you next meeting with Star?
I don't have any plans to, but I want whatever the future of that looks like to make sure it's focused on the men and women around the gambling tables, not those wearing suits around the boardroom tables.
On a separate
Yeah, Freddie?
I have a question on the Spruce matter.
Yes.
Why is the government making a move to
Look, let's let the whole process play out. But I make the commitment to Queenslanders that through tragedy like this, if system reform comes from it and we can better protect kids in the future, you bet that'll happen.
So Queensland has launched an inquiry into youth gender medicine and the use of puberty blockers.
Yeah.
There has been a call for a similar inquiry at a federal level. Would you support a completely separate review at a federal level of the use of puberty blockers and hormone therapy?
My answer might date a little bit because I think the Federal Health Minister is standing up right now. But I'll make comments about Queensland. Our decision to do that followed some really troubling revelations in far north Queensland, and the health and wellbeing of those kids was always front and centre for us. What happens in Canberra, that's a matter for Canberra. But I think you've seen by the way that we've addressed it and the way that we've made sure that everything is about the wellbeing of all Queensland kids. That tells you how we've handled ourselves, and I look forward to seeing what comes out of Canberra. My first priority is to see what happens overnight. If things do escalate, I'll be formally standing up the QDMC, and if that happens, we'll work with councils on the ground, and if assistance is needed in the days ahead, and if there is a requirement for a rebuild, people in North and Far North Queensland need to know that we've got their back. Thanks, guys. See you later.